Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Laurie.
We are going to do another in our series of astrobiographies, and I am super excited about this one. This is one of the most interesting charts and one of the most interesting lives I can imagine. And we are talking about Ruth Westheimer. What else is she called? What will people know her as?
She is Dr. Ruth.
Dr. Ruth. Okay. And Dr. Ruth is still alive today. She is, as far as I know, she's still happily living in New York City in the middle of 2020. She's probably spending a lot more time alone and has probably learned how to function on Zoom like the rest of us have. But it seems like she's still healthy and doing well. So, Dr. Ruth, what is Dr. Ruth known for? Do we want to pull the chart up first or talk a little bit about her first?
Oh, let's talk just briefly about her. She is known for her amazing sex education that she broadcasted ahead of her time. As a woman, she also was a survivor of concentration camps, or she escaped not having to go to concentration camps, but lost her family. So there's a lot of intensity to her story, but she has this wonderful sense of humor and wonderful way of teaching about sex.
Yeah. And, it's really important to really understand Ruth Westheimer. It's really important to understand the period of time that we're talking about. And I would encourage anybody with any interest in astrology or this amazing woman's life. Hulu has a documentary right now called Ask Ruth. It is an excellent documentary, and she's in it. She's a huge part of it. So you actually get to hear her story in her own words and with her own voice and her family. And what an amazing woman. She called herself, or somebody called her, and I just have to say this, they were calling her the happy munchkin of sex. She is only 4'7" tall. She's a tiny, tiny human being. Anyway, yeah, her program came out, I think, on the radio in 1984, and it was called Sexually Speaking. It was started, they started it at like a half an hour show or a 10-minute show, I think it was, at midnight on some, and they didn't think it was going to do anything. They were worried about how people would respond to it, and it blew up. In the 1980s, no one talked about sex. And that's the thing that is hard now to imagine, how little information there was, how little people spoke about the realities of our lives. And she had such a free, open, she would say whatever there was to say, and she didn't hold back anything.
Yeah, she really helped pave the way for where we are now. She's one of those kind of pioneers of bringing that stuff to the forefront.
Yeah.
And the documentary is excellent. I mean, Laurie's always good at recommending documentaries, everybody, but this documentary is very good and it's hilarious. And I learned a bunch of things about her. One of the things you will learn is that she was actually briefly a sniper, which is crazy to think about. So definitely highly recommend it.
Yes. She was a sniper for the Jewish Underground Army. I don't remember the year of that, but it shows up in her chart too. We'll look at that.
So let's go ahead and take a look at it, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. So here is Dr. Ruth's chart.
Dr. Ruth, I think we should contact her and send her a copy of this recording. So here it is. And the first thing that jumps out here, without even knowing anything about astrology, you see that concentration in the first and the seventh, self and other. So her interest in relationship itself is very evident right off the bat.
Yeah, so Laurie's referring to this big chunk of Gemini here in the first house is probably the first thing, and that's a great starting point because it's the sun. And most people know their sun signs. And even if you don't, it's super easy to figure out. So it's a great starting point. So there's that sun and Gemini in her case, because she was born early in the morning. It's close to the rising sign, because it was almost the time for the sun to rise. The sun was trying to rise.
Yeah.
So they're close together. So we already know there's a lot of Gemini to this lady's personality.
Right.
And then what's the third piece, Laurie? You got sun, ascendant. What's the other thing we always look at?
The moon, which is right opposite it in this chart.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a full moon chart, and let's just draw that line out here. She was born at the full moon, which to me, that really indicates a real clarity of what she needs to be who she is. She has a real understanding of herself and her path in life. And, yeah, the sun is in Gemini. There's just such a energy to gather information and understand things on an intellectual level, and using that to feed kind of the need of the Sagittarius moon. And what does the Sagittarius moon need?
Oh, it needs to have one's opinion respected.
Yeah. Noel Till's wording is the Sagittarius moon needs to have the opinions respected. So she gathers a lot of information, and really needs that information, and how she puts it out toward others to be respected. So there's that. And then the rising sign, the Gemini. So you could make a little just archetypal statement for her out of those three pieces. What would we say, Jenny? We could say,
I'd say the teacher for the sun. The teacher is the sun, with the heart of that moon in Sagittarius, the heart of the explorer. I mean, for sure, just like bringing authentic vision for us, and having to perceive that herself. And then, what do you think? I mean, wearing the mask, I'm like, I think the ascendant is sort of the mask that you wear. And in this case, it's like, it is the teacher, but it's also the storyteller.
Right.
I think that's how she drew people in. Gemini brings in that storytelling, teaching type of attitude.
So that is so much of who she is. And one of the pieces from the documentary that I loved was when she was 10 years old. She left Germany. Her parents put her on a train with the Kinder Transport to bring her to Switzerland to keep her safe. And she was just a little girl. She was 10 years old. And she's on this train with hundreds of other children who were also scared and getting taken away from their homes. And what did she do? What did she do, Jenny?
She got all the other children to sing. She started singing songs, and all the children joined in, and it just eased the whole attitude on the train. It was really powerful, really.
And I think that is so, you see that here with the Mercury rules her ascendant, which makes Mercury really as important in many ways as the sun and moon. And her Mercury is in Cancer. That just kind of knowing what is required to soothe people in the moment. And I think she really had a knack for that.
For sure. Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
And I mean, in all of her communications, she didn't, let's see, when she was doing Sexually Speaking and all the stuff that came after, all the talk shows and all that she did after, of talking so directly about sex, was her way of nurturing and helping people. And you can see, I love this, how that Mercury squares Mars and squares Uranus. So what did she talk about? She talked about sex in a very unusual way and very authentic way. You bring in some of the Uranus things of, it was totally unexpected how she would talk about things that nobody talked about. Uranus just blew up her conversations around sex. So interesting to see that. And that also, I just have to say that not only is this her talking, her focus around sex, but it's also her sniper, her inner sniper.
Totally. Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
Mars,
absolutely.
I think of Mars as
Aries energy.
right. It's in Aries. Mars in Aries is, you say, connected with
Warrior.
Mercury. You're going to say what needs to be said.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Mars in Aries is also, it's the warrior position. It's that sniper. She was really tapped into that.
Yeah.
On both counts.
Yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, a couple other things too. So as you're saying, she's talking about these topics you don't expect. Or one of the reasons, or that she's successful, or the way it shows up in astrology, is that also on her ascendant. So right here, ascendant at 6 degrees Gemini, she's got Venus.
Yeah.
So that brings in this energy of like making people feel comfortable, like harmonizing, like kind of tuning in and making it more palatable. So that was one of the secrets of her success. Is that right?
The happy munchkin of sex.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But then on the other end of it, when you go and look at her moon and you recognize this symbol right next to the moon is Saturn, well, that brings in this seriousness. So she's going to be taken seriously.
Right.
So that's kind of how you start from understanding astrology perspective, is just like weaving in some of these other things. And it's as simple as that. Saturn is seriousness, Venus as harmonizing and making things palatable.
It's interesting that Saturn conjunct her moon, and there's a lot of, she's had a hard life. Clearly, she had some awful difficulties in her life, and that Saturn is retrograde, and it rules the 8th house, which is also about sex. There's a sexual component there. I think in order to understand how she could speak with others, how she could bring her opinions. It's just kind of interesting that sexuality became part of her work, her emotional work, and how she brought it out into the public. Now, let's talk about the midheaven.
Yeah.
Because that is, she's still with us. So we can still meet her on the street. Well, probably not in the middle of a pandemic, but she is still with us. But what she is known for is always going to be seen through the midheaven, which is the point of the career, the highest point at the moment of birth. And what do you see there?
She's got her midheaven in Aquarius. So right away, you're bringing in themes that are unusual. In Till speak, it's the desire to be socially significant. So this is where some of the impact can be felt. And what's interesting is this, for me, is just seeing it at 4 degrees of Aquarius. It does mean it is being activated right now by that Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. And what do we see? This documentary. Yeah. Not quite sure when it came out, but just she's in the public eye again.
I think it came out when in the springtime, when transiting Saturn initially went into Aquarius for a little while. I think that's when it came out.
Yeah.
But
so
the charts do. The transits is clear there. That transit. Yeah. Good point. Good point. And I think, it's also interesting that the midheaven in whole sign houses again is in the 9th house, which is a teacher, part of the career has to be around teaching.
That really echoes, that's when you're looking for those repeating patterns. So it echoes that Gemini sun and that Sagittarius moon. is this
Right.
information and teaching and sharing of ideas. And then also because it's air with Aquarius, it's able to be objective, so she's able to bring in these
Right.
topics and
Right.
talk about them and keep them in a realm where people can digest them and work with them and accept them and not get like their face triggered off or whatever,
Yeah.
especially in the 80s. People are
Yeah.
still very like about sex, so it's quite
Right. And she's also got the ability to keep herself detached from it.
mm,
I mean, there is nowhere, people are always trying to ask her questions about her, her sexual relationship with her husband. And boy, she closes those down. It's like, that's not what we're talking about here.
yeah.
And I
Yeah,
think
and
that's
that's
interesting.
yeah. You're right. She's really private. It's
Yeah.
really interesting to see. But I mean, you'd have to be in that role.
Right. Right.
But also, like, she really did her. She had, I think, 3 husbands. Her third husband, who
4.
I think he passed away. Oh, was it 4? Wow.
She had
So
4 husbands. Yeah.
her the one that passed away in '97 is the father of one of her kids. I think she really loved him, and it was really hard. But I just wanted to say, with Moon in the 7th house, partnerships are going to be important.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And the other thing, you were talking about how that midheaven in Aquarius mirrors the opposition of the sun and the moon in terms of teaching what she knows, bringing it out into the world. And it also reflects the Mercury squared by Uranus. With
absolutely.
Aquarius on the midheaven, Uranus rules the midheaven. And what's Uranus doing here? It's basically conjunct Mars. It might be a little bit of a, yeah, it is. It's conjunct Mars, and they both square Mercury. So what is she doing? She's talking about sex, Mars in Aries, to the larger community.
Mm,
I mean,
yeah.
this is really clear connections here. It's
Yeah.
so interesting.
Yeah, I know. The other thing I want to mention is
Yeah.
maybe it's a little bit off topic in a way, but I just am fascinated by this Jupiter in the very, very last degree, last minute of Aries. And what I read that is that it's this reach. It's reaching out towards Taurus. It's reaching out and Taurus is that sensuality, that behind the scenes, like the more central aspect of sex, that physical component of it. And so something about Jupiter as part of her life purpose, reaching out to that more Taurus aspect rather than staying in the Aries and the more masculine and even in sniper world, like
Right,
it's
right.
so anyway. So I just wanted to
Oh,
point out, those of you who are new to astrology or whatever, just anytime you see that 29 degrees of something, it's inherently unstable. So you have to ask the question, why? Like,
yeah.
why is it
Why?
unstable? What's it
Right,
tipping towards? And
right.
my head just kept, or my eyes just kept seeing that symbol. So
Well, I think that that's really interesting. I'm glad you brought that up because it brings our attention to Chiron in Taurus in that 12th house. And, there's an element, Taurus it's the body, it's the sensual side of the body. You can think about Aries as sex and, that kind of masculine drive towards sexuality, which would be Mars in Aries. But then this is the more sensual side of the body. And with Chiron in here, it's like there's an element where, and we've got a sextile here from Mercury. Her voice is healing the hidden path to sensuality, and Jupiter is kind of pointing or tipping in that direction.
hmm.
Does that make sense the way I worded that?
Oh yeah, totally. I think, yeah. Chiron's always a fun symbol to think about. In simple terms, it's the wounded healer. So
Right.
it's the wound the person sustains that they are then able to turn around and teach about. And so that's kind of what, and I think about with Taurus, it's like the physical comforts, you know, of
Oh,
of sex, the physical, that end
oh.
of it.
And it's interesting because somewhere in that documentary, she talks about, I can't really remember exactly what it was, but what it left me with was, sort of part of why she was married 4 times was she was always really in need of physical comfort.
Mm.
You know, she was an only child. She had parents and a grandmother that adored her. She was really, really a loved child that got lots of affection and lots of physical affection. And at 10 years old, it was just cut off from her. And that must be what that wound is. And part of this, her path around sexuality, I think really was in that, you know, combined with all these other more dynamic, more obvious things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's rough. I mean, I was also really struck in the documentary just by how, I mean, that's so rough to just lose your parents. Like they just disappeared. I mean, they sent her off to the school and she had these beautiful letters from them, and then they just stopped.
Yeah.
And that was that. And it wasn't until much, much later that she had confirmation about what had happened. I mean, she knew obviously because they didn't come back, and there were some indications they were never on any lists of people who'd been found or anything like that. But she just, there's something about her where she just kept in that forward direction.
Yeah.
She just was determined to not get pulled down, you know, and by those things. And she really had this powerful forward direction.
Yeah.
But
And she had to work hard for it.
Yeah.
She had to work for it, but she had so much drive and passion with that. You know, Mars in Aries is always a particular statement. You know, Mars rules Aries. When Mars is in Aries in somebody's chart, they are going to push forward. What was it? One of her kids had said that she was a whirlwind of activity. She never, ever, ever slowed down. And she's still at 90 something years old. In that documentary, you'll see her. She's like, wow, this woman has a ton of energy. And I had drawn this. I just want to like reinstate this. You know, Uranus is in a sextile to the midheaven. So, you know, Uranus rules the midheaven and it sextiles it. It's such a powerful, she had to do something unusual.
Yeah.
She could not have been a school teacher.
No.
You know.
Needed to be her own way, her own thing.
Right. She had to do something that was very uniquely hers, and a powerhouse of a woman. Amazing. I love her to bits.
She clearly, it reminded me, something else in the documentary is something about her just, she never was going to rest on her laurels. She just said, you never know what can happen. You know, things could change, things could, you know, and there was that kind of ethic through her work. So she was always working towards the next thing, and always still is. That's where she's at. Yeah. What, 92?
Yeah. Well, cool. Ruth Westheimer, I wish you were listening to this recording. I just want to say, what an awesome human being.
Yes, and it was very inspiring.
Very inspiring and very, you know, I don't think there's any way to underestimate the influence, the change that her work really brought to all of us. You know, anyway, I love her. Yeah. Are we ready to wrap it up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you, Jenny. I can't wait to see who we do next. This is super fun.
It is really fun. Yeah. So thanks for watching, everyone. And you can find Laurie at astrolore.org, consultations and recordings. And you can find me at hiddenpathastrology.com.
And we both do some teaching and mentoring. Actually, Jenny does more teaching. I do more mentoring at this point, I think. Is that correct for you?
That sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, thank you all. Contact us and keep your eyes out. We'll be doing many more of these.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks. Bye-bye.